About 3 years ago, I started getting a pretty intense pain on the top of my right shoulder. I didn't think much about it. I had injuries, most of my adult life. Played a lot of sports, and I still like to be active, go to the gym. So I figured I'd pulled something or done something while I was benching. And so I laid off of it for about 6 or 7 weeks. It would kind of come in waves as far as the pain. But about 6 months later, about 2.5 years ago, the pain wasn't stopping. It was getting worse. And I couldn't really figure out what was irritating my shoulder. I figured it was wear and tear I played a lot of baseball growing up. And so I went and saw a couple doctors. They all kind of said the same thing. Took x-rays, couldn't really see much. They basically said, hey, we're gonna have to do surgery. You have some bone spurs. You may have some tear in your rotator cuff. So I decided to get surgery on my right shoulder about 1.5 years ago. It wasn't a pleasant experience. It wasn't super intense, but they did a scope. They shaved down some of the bone spurs. I did have some tearing in my rotator cuff, and rehabilitation was pretty annoying. But the worst thing was about 3 or 4 weeks into my rehabilitation, my right shoulder, the very same pain started in my left shoulder. And at that point, I knew something was going on because I knew I hadn't injured my left shoulder. And I had thought about a book that my friend had actually told me about a year earlier. He had showed me a 2020 video of Dr. Sarno and how this guy had healed a bunch of people with back problems without surgery, without pain meds. And so my wife and I watched that 2020 video again, and they had mentioned this book. And so my wife actually started reading it and telling me about how, repressed emotions and stress and traumatic experiences lead to a lot of pain. And I looked it back in my conscious mind. I was like, I've had a great life. I haven't had a lot of trauma. And so, anyways, one of the things that she learned that you're supposed to do, according to Dr. Sarno, is to write about some experiences, whether it's stress or past trauma, in a journal. And I remember telling her specifically, I'd rather have this pain than write in a journal. But ironically, that night I put the kids down and I sat down at the kitchen table, and for about 10 or 15 minutes, I just started writing. And at first, I didn't feel like I knew what to write about, but I just wrote about some things that, experiences that had bugged me, in my youth, or current stresses with my job. And I wrote a lot longer than I thought I would. Didn't really know what I was doing, hadn't even read the book. And then I went to bed. And the next morning I woke up and I had zero pain in my left shoulder. For the first time, I hadn't had pain in my shoulder for years. Of course, this was a couple months later after my rehabilitation on my right shoulder, but I had no pain after one session. And I woke up and I told my wife, and I couldn't believe it. And in fact, in my head, I thought, this is gonna come back. And sure enough, it did, a little bit over time. So when I had that result, I decided, there's something to this. So I started to write in what I called my burn journal nightly. I started listening to Dr. Sarno's book, The Mind Body Prescription, and also Healing Back Pain. And by reading those, listening to those, and writing in my journal, my shoulder pain went away. And it went away in a matter of weeks. Every now and then I'll get flare-ups, but it's because I'm either being lazy and not practicing what Dr. Sarno's methods are. But I know that the pain that I was dealing with was TMS, and I just had to manage my stress better. And I feel terrible because my friend had told me about it a year earlier. I could have avoided surgery, but I'm glad that I found it. And I could not believe that nobody else had heard about this and that this was not mainstream. So I hope this can help somebody. If you're dealing with chronic pain, give it a try. Listen to his books, and chances are it probably is TMS, and it could really help you out.